this just to sort of see, you know, I guess more of the issues of it within St. Louis and kind of how it really affects lots of different communities. So I'm excited to hear about it all tonight.
Madeline?
I'll pass it to Madeline.
Hi, everybody. I use she, her pronouns. I am a fellow at Great Rivers Environmental Law Center, focusing on investigating the lead contamination issue in St. Louis public schools. I just have a broader interest about environmental racism in general, so I'm just here to learn from the community and excited to be here. And I will pass it to the person that says iPhone. Maybe it doesn't say iPhone on your screen, but it does on mine.
That might be me.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess my Zoom is not like set up on my iPhone yet. Okay, cool. I'm Forrest. I use they, them, theirs pronouns. I have like somewhat of a background in environmental issues. I studied environmental studies in school, and then from there I've done like a few different, I've like done work and volunteering in a few different ways revolving around food justice and food access. Some being like a lot more direct action, and then some more sort of like strategic, long-term, kind of involving like gardening and like sharing education resources around farming and gardening, like urban farming specifically. So I don't know, yeah, I'm definitely here to like listen and just hear more about like what people want and need and like what's the top of people's priority list. And then hopefully be, yeah, also like a resource and someone who can help. Yeah.
I think that just leaves Lauren.
Yes. Hi, I'm Lauren. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a college student at SLU, and I'm here just to learn more about environmental racism.
And then, so we have a series of questions that we wanted to address. And feel free to speak up if you want, or don't if you don't want to. But I'm also a professor, and I am the queen of uncomfortable silences to make people speak up when they don't want to. So just as a warning. So the first question is, do you or does someone you know live in an area with limited access to healthy food? And please, anyone, just jump on in.
Hi. Okay, I also have another activist that focuses on food justice that is at the rally, and I just want to introduce them so we can get connected.
Hey everyone, my name's Mina. I use they, them pronouns. I organize with a group called Uprooted and Rising, and we're a national movement to end big food's presence on college campuses. And we're building a group in St. Louis, so hit me up through Maxie, I guess.
I'll share your contact.
Okay.
Hi, Nina.
Would anyone like to speak about living in an area or knowing people that live in an area with limited access to healthy food? Because I can tell you, so now I live in the county, and that's no longer a problem for me or for my neighbors. But I was living in South City, a little bit north of the Dutchtown neighborhood, and that wasn't the case there. There was one grocery store within a mile or so of me, and that grocery store, the produce was always half rotten. It was, once I moved out to the county, that changed significantly. And there are grocery stores, it seems like every couple of blocks, and the produce feels like it's straight off the trucks. And it was a shocking difference to see what a few miles made in the frequency, availability, and quality of the produce available in a neighborhood. And well, I'm happy to be a beneficiary of it now. I'm not happy that everyone does not have equal access.
Hi again. I'm still here. I want to piggyback on that. Like living in like low income areas, I've definitely had to like get food from Family Dollar or like markets, like international markets that only have canned foods. And I definitely personally know what it's like feeling weak from not being able to get enough vitamins and nutrients. And like as like a Black, queer, non-binary artist, it's like kind of how we have to live most of our 20s so that if we can make it to our 30s, that we get there, and even like before it, like in teenage years. I just wanted to put that in there, my shared experience.
Okay, and so we're going to skip the second question then. Let's go to the third. What do you think needs to change to stop this from happening? Stop sort of the frequency and number of food deserts in majority Black neighborhoods in St. Louis?
Hi, everyone. I can speak to both questions. Sorry, I didn't chime in earlier. But my grandmother's neighborhood, my late grandmother's neighborhood's the Ville. And I just remember as a kid having to fish in like Fairground Park and other resources to actually use like catfish and other proteins caught wild to like supplement her food and enough protein. And my dad still to this day, we have cousins that still live in that area who don't even like wait for my dad to bring caught catfish and other things so they don't have resources to get to them in that area to find enough protein. And that triples a different issue because there's high mercury levels in the fish here. There's other pollutants and toxins. So it kind of just doubles down on other health issues my grandmother's community and my cousin's experience. And just to a suggestion, obviously, the issue is urban gardening is getting really popular, and just teaching communities how to garden and changing those vacant lots to gardens would be a possible solution. Obviously, there needs to be a lot of upfront work with that, but just sharing some ideas.
Thank you, Madeline. Those are both fantastic ideas, and urban gardening and the use of vacant lots, which of course there are many in the city, is a very, I agree. It's a very good way to minimize the harm that food deserts cause. Would anyone else like to speak to this issue? We really are open ears and would love to hear anything that you have to share.
So one thought that has kind of bounced around in my head, and I don't know, I can't really speak to whether this would work in St. Louis or not. Where I went to law school on the south side of Chicago, there was a co-op that was owned by the people who shopped there. You had to join the co-op. It was a very minimal fee. But basically it was a community-owned grocery store, and then the people who owned the grocery store got to decide what kind of food was being purchased and offered for sale. And it was also sort of doubled as like a community center. Now I think that particular neighborhood has been gentrified and it's changed. But at the time I was in law school there, which was a long time ago, it was a really great resource. And I'm sure there are barriers to getting something like that started, but it seems like that could be sort of a community-owned grocery store could be kind of an option that maybe we should consider thinking about.
That was great, Sarah. You know, thinking about like how we can like mobilize to get these actions into place is really, important. I think, how can we use people power to say, shut down General Mills and be like, hey, you are not making your food accessible to these communities, or shut down, Family Dollar for preying on Black communities and not giving us the adequate food that we need. Like, I think that when we have like the legal aspect, it's very important, but also changing the social narrative definitely needs like on the ground, boots to the ground, like action. And do you want to add on that?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest issues, like the barriers to food sovereignty, is the lack of access to land. So we really need to be thinking about land justice, who's not only owning land, but who's stewarding it as well. And like in this city, the conversation around Indigenous sovereignty has been so erased, and which is related to the fact that the arch is here and we're the gateway to the West, and like I use that in quotes. But this is like the starting point of colonization across what is now the colonial US. But we need folks to like reconnect with land and have access to land. And there's like a lot of great work happening in North City right now, and a lot of emerging projects around getting Black youth like on that land and like experiencing what it's like to actually be connected to the roots of where our food comes from, and not big food and all the like corporatized food chain aspects that keep us like so disconnected from understanding like what food sovereignty really is. Okay, I'm rambling right now. Take this back.
We accept all rambling, so do not worry. And those were all very good ideas. Thank you. The other topic, does anyone else want to talk about food apartheid, or would you like it, or if not, I'm going to move on to home energy costs.
I was just going to kind of add on to what some people were saying about sort of like that community effort and having like some of those like community centers be sources of food. Because I didn't chime in because I haven't necessarily experienced it in St. Louis. But like when I was living in Chicago, like I had to walk oftentimes to the grocery store, and like when I moved, I was like, oh, the grocery store is a mile away. Like that doesn't seem so bad. And then I was like, I don't have a car. And so like walking to and from the store, like especially once I was carrying those bags, was a lot more, like I think just a lot more of an effort than I had initially thought it would be, and just like the time commitment. So if like communities and neighborhoods are sort of developing a lot of these solutions or these centers where food is being, being sold, or they kind of become these community hubs, and I think it's a lot easier for people in the community to have that access without tacking on all this extra time just getting to and from the store, which I think a lot of people already don't have that time if they're already stressed with other things. So I think I like the idea of those community centers, or those areas where food is being that center of the community, just because I think it helps with like that access issue and just getting to and from some of those locations.
And it is amazing. A mile seems like nothing when you have a car, but if you are in an area where you have to carry a week's worth of groceries for a family of 4 or more, a mile is a very long distance. And unfortunately, the communities that statistically lack access, like as we talked about earlier in the presentation, the communities that statistically lack access to grocery stores also lack access to cars and frequent public transportation routes. So it's an untenable situation. And before we move on, I just want to keep this sort of door open. Any other comments related to food apartheid?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something that just came to me really quickly. Like, there's a clear need for transformation of our public transit situation here in St. Louis. Is not very equitable at all, where it goes and the routes it takes and everything like that. But I want to point out that there's very clear value in also putting these areas with food in the communities themselves and having them shape how they want it. I just really want to uplift that because I think most of our solutions are going to come like right from the space we're in right now, like community driven conversations. And there's just so much value in this. I just wanted to uplift that. And yes, thank you. I'm done.
And then the is it called emojis in Zoom, or does the word change? I don't know, but I like it. So the next topic talks about energy burden. And has anyone here, or do you know anyone who has lived in a space with the high home energy costs that AK discussed? And if so, could you share a little bit about that story and how that impacted you or them? I see lots of nodding heads. Anyone want to jump in? I can tell you when we, oh, sorry, please go ahead, Matt.
I guess I'll just keep going. So like at the same time I was living in Chicago, I was living in a place with a lot of roommates that was like single pane windows. Like, I mean, there was no insulation. I mean, it was like you were just, I don't know, outside almost. It was very cold. And like during the winter, we almost had like we lived on the second floor. So we thought the downstairs people would turn on their heat and it would rise to us, but they also didn't have the money to spend. So we were just like in this constant, like cold, warm, like just trying to stay warm. And we kept the heat really low. We like tried to use like some space heaters, but we had like this system where some people could have them on and some people couldn't. So we didn't blow out the electricity in the whole building. Like it was just this whole like situation of planning and always wearing like 3 layers. And it was just like, there's some days when we just didn't want to be in our apartment. And we were like, we're just going to go like somewhere else because we just don't want to be in this space where we're constantly uncomfortable all the time. And I can't imagine what that would be like right now if you were under a stay-at-home order. And that was like, you couldn't leave your home to go somewhere public where it was more comfortable. Because, you know, we would just go, we're just going to go to the grocery store because at least it's comfortable there. And it's really uncomfortable here. So, yeah, it was like it was a hard winter that year. But yeah, I just can't imagine if we'd have somewhere else to go.
I know when we drafted the report, we spoke to a woman that it cost so much to use her furnace that she heated her home with her oven because it was cheaper to just turn on the oven and leave that running than it was to use her furnace. It was so old and inefficient. We spoke to another woman who had a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment that cost $700 a month in rent, and she paid $700 a month in utility bills. Her house was so inefficient, whether because of leaks or unsealed windows and doors, cracks, old inefficient appliances. It cost her just as much in rent as it did to heat and cool her apartment. So obviously the impacts of high home energy burden are felt most powerfully on those who have the least amount of money to spend on it, because people with money are in a position to demand that their landlord fix it, or are in a position to fix it themselves because they can afford it. But those without the money, or those that can't fix it themselves, or aren't in a position to demand that their landlord do it themselves. So it's rough, and it serves to keep poor people poorer, which is awful, of course. So what do you all think needs to change to stop this from happening? And please, I really ask, any thought, even if you think it's silly, just say it, because we really,
I think
we want to hear.
I think that we need to really create a St. Louis that has more sustainable energy, and we're not beholden to coal industry. As we're downtown, you can see giant corporation that got their money off of coal, giant corporation that got their money on coal, and they are holding legislators by the testicles, and we're kind of like stuck in this situation where we, you know, we're in debt to these corporations that don't really care about the well-being of the people that are using it. And so like when we're looking for solutions, how can we, you know, one, make sure that these energy companies are beholden to, you know, citizens and when, you know, looking at sustainable energy from Amran and like having grants for that, but also how can we make it so that there's policy change that people cannot rent a house that is old and drafty, and that, like, you know, what can we make sure that there are standards that don't hurt people that are renters or, you know, immigrant homeowners or whatever. You know, how can we make it so that these houses are up to code and those regulations aren't holding people back from having housing and energy efficient housing?
Picking up on that theme, one of the issues we've experienced through Great Rivers is there are some pretty good ordinances on the books in the city, but they're just not enforced. And when you go to the aldermen of certain wards with issues or complaints, they get kind of swept under the rug and ignored and never really addressed. And so, you know, figuring out how those can be more appropriately enforced across different wards and different zip codes, I think is a challenge that we've been trying to work on, but it's a difficult one. It's certainly an uphill battle.
Well, and I think kind of like Maxie was saying, like, I think a lot of it has to do with the companies that sort of control a lot of the energy that we get it from. But also like the other piece of it is also like just making it so that almost all of these homes have to be like systematically updated in terms of their efficiency. And I got no idea what it looks like. But if all your energy comes from solar, but the cold wind still comes through, it doesn't do you a ton of good, and you need both pieces. So I think I don't know what that looks like, having someone systematically go through and update all that, but you'd almost have to go like, you know, ward by ward, house by house, and just make sure that like everybody has those like double paned windows and a door that's well sealed and all of these pieces. You know, like you can't rent until you have all those things in place, because those are just like the basics of just being comfortable in your own home.
Yeah, I would like to piggyback off of that. And as you were saying that, what popped in my mind is the idea of like community trust and funds and co-ops, corporations. I can't speak this evening. It's been a long day. But where community members go in it together and purchase portions of their community and like build it up from there. I think that would be a really great way to be beholden and accountable to each other, and making sure that your housing and your utilities are up to code and up to par, instead of a landlord that's not living in that house, not living in that area, don't know what it's like. They're just worried about getting the money necessarily, not making sure that your quality of life is being improved or whatnot. And especially with everyone being living at home, well, not being stuck at home with the stay-at-home order and everything. That's really crucial right now, that people are able to have their voices heard on how they're able to live a life wherever they are that's comfortable, because we don't have many people don't have very many other options. And so how can we improve people's quality of life at home in regards to just like matter of being present in that space?
Yeah, that was, oh, sorry.
Oh, please go ahead. You haven't spoken.
I was just gonna say, like, yeah, a thought that popped up for me, that a few people have touched on is just like holding landlords a lot more accountable, because landlords, I feel like, get away with just so much with just ignoring like the quality of the buildings that their tenants stay in, and it's like kind of wild. And then like with this case specifically with energy, and then like that's happening, and like then like all these companies are benefiting from that, to where like then people's energy costs are like going up so much, and it's just, I feel like, one of those cyclical things. So it just feels like, along with like new policies, and like sort of standards that buildings have to be kept up with, like it feels like a big part of that would also be like holding landlords accountable and the people who actually own those buildings, because it just seems like, yeah, they just get away with like way too much.
I've never seen you be quiet before.
It's for housing, energy costs, and food appetites. I'm not. Hi, sorry, I'm explaining to someone about where I'm eating about. So I think, one thing that I wanted to add upon is like the fact of housing instability, how some people might be indifferent about like the inefficiency of the building that they're about to rent. I know definitely growing up, there were times when I would rent somewhere that had holes in the walls because that was the only place that would rent to me for under the table. And so like, as we look at policy change, we also have to understand those that live outside of policy in the underground, and how we can make not just legislation, but like social reshift of what is acceptable for us to live in. And that accessibility is really different between a case by case scenario.
Now, a lot of the issues that we're talking about are with landlords, which of course, I mean, that is the problem. If someone owns their own home, they're frankly responsible for choosing, fixing things or not. That's not really a government problem to come in, at least in my mind, to come in and replace someone's furnace. But in landlord housing, you have this issue where there's a problem with incentives. A landlord has an incentive to earn as much money as he or she can, and a tenant has an incentive to pay as little money as he or she can. Any money that the tenant puts in to improve the apartment benefits the landlord, not the tenant. I mean, it benefits the tenant in the short term, but any serious improvements benefit the landlord, because a tenant can't take a furnace with him or her. Can't take a patched wall with him or her. So you only have 60 seconds. Do you have any sort of thoughts on changes you would like to see specifically in the landlord-tenant relationship? Because I do think that is so important. Or any experiences that you want to share there where you wanted something changed and you were unable to, or succeeded?
What really helped me in a crappy college housing situation is my college kind of had like an ADR, like an alternative dispute resolution, where we could go for free to kind of sit down with landlords to kind of negotiate like what was going on in our housing situation. And, being a college kid, just not really understanding my rights as a tenant, that was so helpful. And I think it really scared our landlord to not be predators, because there's kind of like a third watchdog. So I really think like tenants and landlord clinics and just like free access to that kind of representation, or just advocacy of knowing those rights, would be helpful in terms of trying to get the resources to get better windows and better, utility situations going on for you.
And we can keep on talking for the next 60 seconds. It'll drag us over whether we want to or not in 60 seconds. Anyone else? I really like these ideas, and I kind of want to hear more if there are more.